Thank you for coming early. I understand you would have had to work late tonight otherwise.
Well, this merger is perhaps the biggest thing on my plate at the moment. It would have been foolish of me to miss dinner tonight.
I mean, I have the papers for signing. If you ask me, you might as well be working late after all.
Sir, Mr. and Mrs. Nathaniel Williams have arrived.
Show them in.
Right this way.
So,
Mr. Campbell, it's an awful night for a drive.
I hope the roads didn't give your driver too much trouble.
Oh no, it wasn't bad getting here, but it's going to be awful to get back.
Others pulled up behind us. I wonder what's taking so long.
One of them is probably Norma. The woman takes forever going anywhere.
Sir, Mr. Scott.
Cornelius, my good man, how are you?
Good, my friend. How are you?
Good, never better. I'm so glad that you could be here. I hope the house has been comfortable for you.
Oh, it's been fine. Thank you again for allowing me to stay here these past few weeks.
Of course, I'm just so glad you could make it.
Darling,
Mr.
I
Campbell
know
expects
the
that all of
way.
our guests receive
No
a
need
fine
to
entrance
introduce
at
me. Oh, Frederick.
Evening, Norma.
Miss Right, sir.
Evening, Fred, darling. Who is this? I thought I'd met all your friends.
This is Cornelius Scott, recently returned from...
Morocco.
Oh, how exotic. I'm sure you had a fantastic adventure there.
It's less fantastic when there's a war on.
Oh, pardon?
Miss Wright, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I've been meaning to speak to you at previous functions.
Freddie! My artistic patron. How are you, my good sir?
Oscar, impulsive as always, I see.
Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, sir.
Poor Rupert, can't catch a break.
It has been, as they say, une éternité.
Ah, mon boot.
I believe it's pronounced Mon Boutte.
Très bon, monsieur.
You can call me Mr. Williams.
Ah, well, Mr. Williams, you're quite clever.
Thank you so much for coming.
Of course, Freddie. We wouldn't have missed it for the world. Hello. I don't believe we've met. My name is Oscar Thompson. This is my wife, Florence. May I ask for your name?
I'm Nathaniel Williams. My father is Walter Williams of Williams Textiles Company. He invited me as one of his plus ones.
Nice to meet you, Nathaniel. Do you work with your father at all?
I work in the advertising side of the business. He handles most of the day-to-day around the factory. What do you do for a living, Mr. Thompson?
Yes. I'm the head of props and costumes with the Ferguson Theater Company. You might have heard of one of our shows, Oui, Madame, The Wooing of the Violin.
I can't say that I have.
It closed before it even started.
It's not my fault the writing was bad. Our costumes were amazing and were plastered all over the advertisement. I would have thought you, being in advertising, you might have seen the posters.
Oh, well, I work in business advertising, so most of the ads I see are for things like soap and toothpaste. May I ask why you're here? What's your connection to Mr. Campbell?
Well, I got an amazing deal for his company to be our only supplier for textiles. We make all of our costumes under my direction, of course. He's even considered broadening the deal to include other things such as feathers and sequins, things like you find at a milliner. Rumor has it he might buy out Norma Wright's old haberdashery to do so. To be honest, I don't think she'd be too broken up, considering it's hard running a business after husband dies.
That's interesting. And you, ma'am?
I am one of the company's actresses.
You're more than that, darling. You're the star.
Well, it was nice to meet both of you.
Of course. It would be great to get to know you even better over dinner, possibly. Over a few drinks, maybe. Freddie should have some good wines.
Sorry, I don't drink.
Oh, okay.
So, you and Frederick are friends. How'd you two come to know each other?
We actually met in a business management class in college before I changed my major. We hit it off, and we've been writing ever since.
Ah, I see. What have you been up to so far out from these old college days?
Well, I'm an academic of sorts. I've traveled the world using my family's funds and investments to write for various academic journals. Besides that, I've traveled across the pond quite frequently.
Really? What's it like over there? I haven't traveled in quite some time now. I can never seem to get away from my factory.
It's different. Everywhere you go, it's different. The people, the cultures, the food. I'm especially interested in these differences as an anthropologist by hobby, although I could have easily done without the mysteries.
Mysteries?
I have this bad habit of wandering into the wildest of scenarios. A murder here with no witnesses, a double homicide with no fingerprints. I've seen so many, I've grown tired of them. Hopefully I'll finally find peace here in the States.
Well, I hope you don't find any mysteries here.
Me too, Mr. Williams. Me too.
Dinner is ready.
Perfect. Let's eat, everyone.
Don't you think you should change your shirt? This is an important speech.
I don't have time for that, and I don't want the Williams in my home any longer than they need.
Oh, Freddie!
Please, give the man some space. What happened?
Can we get on with it? This is the main event after all, and I need to get these in the mail as quickly as possible. The Chamber of Commerce needs to sign these to make it official, and we don't want this to last any longer than it needs to.
Yes, of course. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know many of you lead quite busy lives, but I'm sure we can agree that they can wait for this moment. For the past 20 years, the Campbell and Williams textile companies have been competing to be on top, but that ends today. With this agreement that Walter and I have reached, the company will be stronger than ever. With this merger, I can now announce the founding of the Campbell Williams Textile Company.
Woo! Yes, I believe this calls for some drinks. One for everyone. Wait, not you, Nate. I remember. Freddie, where's the whiskey?
It's in the cabinet over there, but honestly, couldn't you wait just a moment?
Of course not. We have to celebrate. A toast to the Campbell Williams Textile Company.
Mr. Scott, a call for you from Morocco.
What? Who could be calling me from Morocco?
A man, supposedly an ambassador, wants to
Oh,
speak.
so I'm sorry, everyone. I must take this.
I wonder what that's all about. He apparently had a mysterious career in Morocco.
How interesting.
I wonder if this call has any connection to the cases he solved abroad.
Cases? What cases?
Well, I once heard that he solved a case with several deaths and no evidence.
Well, that doesn't sound quite right from what I understand of mysteries.
Well, maybe you should let your imagination shine a bit more.
Miss Thompson, please.
Please call me Florence.
Florence. It's not as if morbid things just happen around him all the time.
Frederick? Frederick?
Oh.
Frederick? Frederick? Frederick! Please!
What the fuck has happened here? This death was no accident. Frederick's body shows signs consistent with an allergic reaction, specifically one that caused inflammation. Usually this could be attributed to a mistake on the part of the kitchen staff. But this is his kitchen, his staff. They would know his allergen, and they never use that ingredient. The question then becomes, how did this happen? I cannot rule out foul play, but I should question the witnesses first. Perhaps their testimonies can shine some light on how Frederick was behaving before his death. I'll have to be subtle. People interview differently when they get the impression a nefarious element is involved. They become suspicious over every little thing, even if it's completely unrelated to the matter at hand. I cannot let them know this wasn't natural. At least, not yet. This situation is one that I have always dreaded. To witness the death of a close friend and then to have to solve the mystery of his death right after. This will be most difficult. But I will get to the bottom of this. For Frederick.
Well, Mr. Scott, what do you think?
I'm not sure. I don't have all the resources I prefer in this situation, but I will have to make do. Mr. Collins, I'd appreciate a picture of what happened here when he died, since I wasn't in the room.
Yes, you see, well, Frederick and I...
Please tell me this was natural. I don't think I could bear it if it was a murder. Oh, Frank.
Well, as I was just telling Ernest, I'm not a coroner, and I have no tools to tell, even if I was. I was simply trying to get a better picture of what happened here. So, Mrs. Wright, if you're finished, I'd appreciate it if we could all calm down and describe clearly what happened. Mr. Collins, go on.
You see, Frederick and I.
Hazel, Florence, and I were talking about your ventures in Morocco when Frederick began to choke. He coughed something awful. I think he'd been coughing since the soup course, or perhaps even longer, but this was different. He clawed at his neck and ties, sputtering as he died. It was so horrible. I could have sworn he whispered a name as he fell.
I don't know about the whispering part, but yes, I was the closest to Frederick when he fell. But that's roughly what happened, yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Collins. Now, Mr. Thompson.
Please, Mr. Scott, I know what I heard.
Fine. Mrs. Wright, please describe in detail exactly what happened.
I was so upset after Florence spilled the wine on Fred. He didn't even have time to change shirts before his big moment. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Scott. I didn't care much about the documents. I wasn't paying attention to Freddie during his speech. This merger was so big for him, but it was hard to be excited because I knew deep down he was coming for me next. Anyways, we had our toast and you left. I admit that I wasn't paying attention to Freddie while I talked with Hazel and Florence about your mysteries in Morocco. I wish I had noticed he wasn't doing very well. I could have been able to help him. He coughed up a storm. There was almost a wheezing to his choking. Hazel fainted. Florence gasped. I've lost my handkerchief. This is all such a mess.
Miss Wright, that's not exactly correct.
Oui, mademoiselle, you are wrong in some particulars.
Why don't you tell him how it happened then?
Now, I haven't known Miss Wright very long, but I don't think it takes much to understand her excitable personality.
Mr. Campbell was not as worked up as she dreamed him to be. I admit I was not horribly attentive after I spilled the wine on his shirt.
He looked uncomfortable since the soup course, but the amount of distress only reached its peak after the signing.
Was there anything that stood out? Where people were standing, objects changing hands?
Everyone had drinks.
Not everyone, dear.
Most of us had drinks. You left. I'm not sure what else there is to tell.
Mr. Collins was closest to Campbell when he...
Right. Did either of you see how the others reacted?
I was so shocked I fainted. I did see Oscar's face. It was astonished like I'd never seen before.
Mr. Collins was properly panicked, shaking Campbell, trying to see if he was all right. Nate's face was frozen and his hands were cold as he clutched my arm. Walter seemed shaken internally, but calm for the sake of others. I'm not sure exactly. Norma sobbed next to me, and then you came in shortly after. It was all a blur. I don't think we can tell you much else.
That's all right. I've heard enough. Thank you. Well, that was informative. At the very least, I have a general idea as to what the women were doing before Frederick died. I've also gotten a picture of what he was like in the moments before his death. He was getting worse throughout the night. I can't say I saw or noticed it as far as, or neither did any of the other men as far as I'm aware, but this wasn't an accident. This couldn't have been a heart attack because there would have been symptoms before. This also reminds me of the old rule I learned while investigating. People are unreliable. Norma, Hazel, and Florence all contradicted each other, and I have no way of knowing who was right. I'll have to be more careful as I continue. If only I had someone here with an impeccable memory to help me. I'll speak with Ernest next. He was standing closest to Frederick, so he should have seen the most. I also need to discuss the estate with him, since I'm the main beneficiary. He should have everything I need.
Would you like me to continue, Mr. Scott? Now that Frederick has passed, there's much that needs to be done.
Actually, Mr. Collins, there is something I could ask of you. I'm not sure if you're made aware, but a few years back, after the death of his wife, Frederick wrote to me to tell me that I would be the sole beneficiary of his estate. Not that I asked for such generosity from an old friend, of course, but I was honored that he trusted me. In light of this, I'd like to look over the documents he signed tonight, including that merger.
Well, it's not like I have those documents on me. It's not like I was expecting this to happen or anything. Oh, Frederick had a client copy. My firm signs in triplicate, although I'm not sure where his copy would be in his house or in any of his offices.
Is there a time I can meet with you later?
You know, I will have my secretary call the house when I get back to the office tomorrow.
Sure, but the merger, you have all those documents with you.
I don't think we should bring those documents out to the public quite yet, but I'd be happy to answer some more of your questions. We need to be careful since I still need to establish client-attorney relationship before I can administer any of that estate.
Are you sure you know all there is to know about this merger?
Mr. Scott, I have read this merger more times than you can count. I know it like the back of my hand. This merger is one of the biggest deals my firm has ever brokered for Mr. Campbell.
All right, I'll take your word for it. Is there another firm to contact now that Frederick has passed for Mr. Williams' side of the deal?
My firm was the only one to handle the case. However, Mr. Williams was able to look over the document many times before a final draft was agreed upon.
Is that normal? I would have thought Mr. Williams' representation would have handled his side of the merger.
Normally, there would be another side for Mr. Williams. However, him and Frederick came to an agreement. I must also reiterate that Mr. Williams could look over the document whenever he wished.
All right. Well, what was Williams gaining? What was Frederick gaining? What was this whole merger about?
You know, this seems like a lot of questions that I should answer.
Mr. Scott,
This is right. I was patient with you before, but I will not tolerate new interruptions on this matter. These are personal questions, and I was asking my lawyer. Now, Collins, explain to me the nature of this merger, please.
All right. Mr. Williams and Mr. Campbell's agreement essentially transferred enough of Mr. Williams' shares to Mr. Campbell so that he would be the controlling shareholder. Mr. Williams was, of course, to work with the good of the company and as the second largest shareholder, but he would not be making any of the primary decisions. As inheritor of that estate, you now hold those shares.
Thank you. And what was Williams gaining from this?
A soft retirement of sorts. He also saved his company from sole management of his stupid son.
You mean to tell me that there is almost nothing that Williams gained from handing over the controlling shares of his company?
Mr. Scott, I think it would be wise if we continued this line of questioning in my office at a later date. I think there are too many ears here.
All right, fine. I'll be here at the house until your secretary calls to set up an appointment. Do you have the number for your firm?
Yes.
Thank you. Everyone, I don't believe there's anything more we can do. Please put everything back where it was at the time of death and adjourn to the dining room.
I will be out right in a minute. I need to take care of these documents. It would be foolish of me to just leave these out for anyone to see. Alright, and I'll have the rest of the week to rewrite that merger. I can fix that estate.
Why did my father sign that merger?
Jeez, kid, make some noise, would you? Thought you were a ghost.
Why did my father sign that merger when he got nothing from it?
Kid, don't go asking questions you don't want the answers to. Besides, client-attorney privilege. You don't get to know unless Mr. Scott wants you to know. Now go on, scram.
Oh, I forgot my handkerchief. Ernest, darling, have you seen my... Oh. Oh. Ernest? Ernest? Somebody help! Oh no! Ernest! No! Oh no! Oh no! Oh.
Nathaniel killed Ernest. It's obvious. He was the last one in the room, and he didn't leave the room. I could even see his shadow from behind the chair. He may have the others fooled, somehow, but I've seen through. It was spur of the moment, it was panicked, it was sloppy. Nathaniel killed Ernest in the heat of the moment. Why did he do it then? What did Ernest say to get Nathaniel all riled up? The only time I remember Nathaniel seeming remotely interested was the merger. There's clearly something fishy about this merger. Ernest was acting strange when talking about it, and if I recall correctly, Mr. Williams hasn't been exactly ecstatic about this whole thing. Perhaps there's a connection between this death and the death of Frederick. Did Ernest know too much? But why now, of all times? It makes no sense. Unless there are two killers. The MO for Frederick's killer is methodical, planned, and most importantly, not Nathaniel. Therefore, I can assume that someone else at this party killed Frederick and is using Nathaniel to tie up loose ends. Maybe if I let Nathaniel think he's gotten away with this murder, he'll unintentionally lead me to the killer. I'll have to pay careful attention to the way everyone acts from here on out, now that my worst fears have been confirmed. And more importantly, I'll need to get law enforcement here as quickly as possible. Rupert!
Sir.
I need you to do something.
Yes, sir.
Call the police, let them know a crime has been committed, and tell them to come to the house as quickly as possible.
Right away, sir.
One more thing. Don't let anyone in or out of this room except under my instruction.
Understood, sir.
Everyone, I must ask that you stay in this room for the time being. Once the police arrive, they will establish a crime scene.
So the police have been called.
Yes, they should be en route soon.
It'll be awfully difficult to get through that storm.
I know, but they will get here. Actually, Mr. Williams, while I had your attention, I was hoping to have a quick interview with you. I wanted to speak with you earlier, but Ernest and I got distracted.
Yes, sir. Come, Nathaniel.
I just wanted to see how you're holding up, Mr. Williams, since you two seem to have the most connections with Frederick from your business in this merger.
Please, sir, call me Walter. We are business associates after all.
Of course, Walter.
Well, the situation's a bit of a shock to me, and Frederick's death has changed everything regarding this merger, and frankly, I don't know what I'm going to do. And Ernest, it's terrible, truly.
Yes, truly awful. Nathaniel, how are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. Just fine.
That's fantastic. Well, Walter, just let me know if you need anything. I guess this is technically my house now, so I can just call for Rupert if you do need anything.
Yes, sir.
Just one more question, Nathaniel, if you will.
Well,
Earlier, you didn't have a drink. May I ask why?
that. Well, Hazel doesn't like me drinking, so I haven't for about 3 or 4 years now.
All right, well, I assume the new amendments help with that.
Yeah, a lot.
Well, that's all I had. I've just spoken with the chief of police. He won't be able to send any offers out for another 2 hours due to the storm and the roads, so we'll have to sit tight for the time being. Mr. Thompson, I haven't had a chance to speak with you yet about this whole affair.
Yes. It's awful, just awful. I can't believe this has happened. And to Ernest, too.
Yeah, it's truly awful. I was just wondering if you happen to remember anything about this night in general, both before dinner and Frederick fell.
Well, when Freddie was first talking to Ernest, he had his briefcase on his left side. And I thought it was odd later that he had it on his right side because he seems to be right-handed. So why did he do that? And then when Walter gave over the handkerchief, I thought it was odd that he had it in his pocket. And it was folded very strangely by normal standards.
Mr. Thompson,
and
please.
he should know that's not how that's done. And then Norma Wright's been trying to get with Freddie all night. And it's just so obvious that I can't help but notice the lack of chemistry and lack thereof. And it's just simply too much.
Mr. Thompson, are you going to tell me you remember every detail of this night?
Firstly, call me Oscar. Mr. Thompson's too formal. Second, of course, I remember things like where everyone was and how everyone acted, where everything was placed. I'm the head of props and costumes. It's my job to remember.
Interesting. Oscar, could you tell me, without sparing a detail, what you remember of the night? Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with dinner. I've had conflicting reports that Frederick was coughing and uncomfortable during the soup course.
Well, maybe not coughing, but definitely uncomfortable. He didn't like that soup.
Yes, I'll admit his chefs didn't make it well.
Yes. Did he pick it because it's from Morocco?
Yes.
Anyways, maybe it was too spicy, but he didn't like that soup. Maybe that's what they saw? There wasn't anything else out of the ordinary until the toast got ruined. I don't know why Florence spilled that glass on him, but she must have had a reason.
Wait, Florence spilled the wine on purpose.
Oh yes, she used a stage trick to make it look like it was an accident, but it was on purpose. You know, I'm surprised that Freddie didn't change his shirt. You know, it's from a famous brand in Italy. An expensive one, too. It would have been a shame to get that stain out. It's awful because, well...
If that's all from dinner, let's move on.
Oh, right. Sorry, I get carried away. Well, Norma tut-tutted about with the stain. She needs to be a little careful. Have some more self-respect throwing herself into all his business like that.
I knew she and Frederick were oddly close, but I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. She's been looking to get hits to Freddie all night.
She was still a little scared of the prospect, from what I understood.
Maybe it was the memory of her husband? What I don't understand is why not sell the business to Freddie in the first place? Why try to get married? I would be excited to see if you could snag her business. I would adore a new shipment of sequins, you know what I'm saying?
Back to the matter at hand.
Yes, sorry. Right. Where was I? Well, Norma was overly upset about the stain. She's not that great an actress. Walter handed Freddie the handkerchief. There was something off about that. First, it was folded weird. Second, it didn't match his suit. It's a real shame when someone isn't coordinated. Right? Well, anyways. I did notice that when Frederick was done mopping up his face, there's a strange white powder just above his lip. Not very much. Not makeup. Maybe it was left over from dinner. There wasn't much else interesting until the signing. You see, they used some nice engraved pens. Sometimes I wish I used one of those. But, yes, my life is too chaotic for a pen. Yes, sir. I only work in pencil. That's odd. Who moved those? Well, anyways, we all had drinks, of course. Except for Nate. Strange boy.
This has gone from bad to worse. Frederick, Ernest, and Oscar are all dead, and the police are still an hour out. This is all just awful. It was Nathaniel again. He shot Oscar with the display gun. I should have seen it, or maybe should have stopped Oscar, or heavens forbid, just sequestered Nathaniel the second I knew what he was capable of. This death is my fault. My hubris led me to ignore a direct threat to satiate my thirst for answers. That must end now. Besides, I believe I know who the killer is. The only thing I don't know is how they're connected to Nathaniel. But I can't let this go on any longer. I have to confront them. Miss Thompson, welcome back.
Mr. Scott, what has happened? Who has done this?
Oscar was shot by Nathaniel using the display gun in the back of the room. And I want to know why it happened.
How should I know? Oscar was a good man who would never hurt anyone.
You killed Frederick, probably using that soup, and now you had Nathaniel kill Ernest and Oscar. Now, why'd you do it? For money? Why?
How could you think this of me? I loved Oscar more than anything, and Ernest before tonight, I never knew the man.
The signs all point to you being Frederick's killer. The soup course was wrong. I know it was, because I've had it before. The kitchen here is phenomenal. They would have known how to make it. So there had to be outside interference. Oscar said you spilled the wine for a reason. What reason, if not to cover your tracks when you killed my friend?
No, I did not.
And then Ernest got too close, so you had Nathaniel kill him off too, probably for some monetary bribe. And then Nathaniel killed Oscar to protect himself. Do you see now what you've done? Death always begets death.
I swear, I had nothing to do with Nathaniel. I don't know why he's done this. I did try to kill Frederick. I brought a dessert from New York, and when no one was looking, I spilled truffle oil into the soup. I saw him get horribly sick at a dinner party some time ago. I just wanted him gone. I didn't want Oscar to know.
So you admit you killed him?
No, again. He did not eat enough. You may not remember, but he had one spoonful and then set it aside. It would not have been enough except to make him a little bit uncomfortable.
One spoonful. You swear that?
Oui, I swear.
And who killed Frederick? How did they do it, and why would they?
I believe, Mr. Scott, that everyone here likely had a reason to want Mr. Campbell gone. You see, every once in a while, Mr. Campbell would have one of these parties where he would use the opportunity to get, I believe the term is blackmail. I would imagine everyone here would have been to one of these parties.
Do you know where this evidence might be?
I've been searching ever since Ernest was killed. I hope since the chaos I might have been able to find it, but he hasn't hidden it in any of the places I've searched. I've looked in the armoire, behind the bookshelf, on the side table, everywhere.
Did you ever get around to the desk?
Oui, that must be it. Mr. Scott, you have my things.
Not so fast. What dirt did Frederick have on you that was worth murder?
Oh, Mr. Scott, I do not believe that is...
You tried to kill my friend. What did he know?
I was a smuggler. It was a lucrative business before my acting career took off, and the wealth was tempting. Oscar never knew. It's a stupid, stupid man.
What did you send out?
Alcohol. It was lucrative, especially because our theater company kept making bad deals despite Oscar's optimism about his deal with Frederick.
Do you swear to stay out of trouble?
Please, sir. If not for you, then for Oscar.
Then I'm afraid once I find these documents, I may, unfortunately, lose some. A nasty shame, but there are so many in this house already. You're free to go, Miss Thompson.
Merci.
Rupert!
Sir?
What do you know about Frederick's blackmail scheme?
Sir, I'm afraid I don't.
Save it, Rupert. I know he had the staff take pictures and eavesdrop on guests.
I was not a key player in that operation, sir. But I could fetch the maid who was in charge of that scheme if you'd like.
Please do, and while you're at it, get me Frederick's keys. I'm assuming they're still on his person.
Right away, sir.
You called me, sir.
Yes, thank you. I was told you were in charge of the blackmail scheme,
The what?
the pictures and the parties. Miss Thompson was one of your targets.
Oh, those parties. Well, I suppose you are the boss now that Mr. Campbell is gone. What do you need to know?
Well, thank you, ma'am. I suppose anything you have on the people here.
Mr. Campbell had me listen in on a few phone calls Miss Norma made. Seems like she was after his estate. Her company's going under and her daughter wants to marry a journalist. Mrs. Thompson,
I don't need to hear about that.
Mrs. Williams, was having an affair a few years back with one of Mr. Campbell's executives. And at one of these parties, Mr. Nathaniel Williams had too much to drink and caused the scene, but I'm not quite sure on the specifics on that one.
What?
Mrs.
No,
Williams.
Hazel had an affair? No wonder she looks like she couldn't care less about Nathaniel. Do you know what happened to that executive?
I don't work in that office, sir, but all I can tell you is I just never saw him at one of these parties again. I assume he got fired.
Really? Never saw him again. All right. Well, I'm sorry. What was your name? I have a feeling we'll be meeting again.
Minnie, sir.
All right.
Was
Thank
that
you.
all?
Yes, you're dismissed. I believe I have it all figured out. It's been a chaotic night, but there have only been 2 killers. It wasn't Norma. I've been told by Oscar that her business was going under and her daughter wished to marry a journalist. A respectable job, but not well paying. She needed money to support herself and her daughter, and that would have come from marrying Frederick. I don't have all the details on her involvement, but she did not stand to gain from Frederick's death. Florence has already explained herself. I'm just sorry that Oscar got dragged into this. There's nothing in here on him. A good man. Ernest was apparently hiding something, but he wasn't being blackmailed for it, as far as I'm aware. And that leaves the Williams. Hazel had an affair. I'm not sure for how long, nor the reasons, but I do know that Frederick found out. So did Nathaniel. He got heated. It was the last time he had alcohol. They had a confrontation, and Nathaniel killed the man in cold blood. From what I've gathered, he didn't even remember the next morning. But Hazel did. She's had him on a tight leash all night, rarely straying too far from his side, always whispering in his ear. I'd imagine she has no love for Nathaniel now, but why did she stick around? And that's the other thing. Nathaniel obviously didn't know what he'd done. So why did he kill Ernest? It's almost like he wasn't doing it for himself. Because he was doing it for his father, Walter Williams. Nothing. Nothing in here on Walter. He always seemed like a good man, a hard worker. So what did Frederick have on him? How did Nathaniel... Walter was being blackmailed for Nathaniel's sake. That's the whole reason for this merger. Frederick knew what Nathaniel had done, and he also knew what it would mean if the heir to the business turned out to be a drunken murderer. So he came to Walter with this offer in exchange for his silence, and Walter accepted. Nathaniel didn't know. He must have talked to Ernest, found out why Walter was doing this, then flew into a rage and killed him. And when Oscar got too close, the lights gave Nathaniel the perfect opportunity to stay in the shadows. But the question remains, who killed Frederick? If it wasn't the soup, what else was... Oh, I see. I see now.
Hazel?
Typical. Well, I suppose you put it all together, Mr.
Don't
Scott.
say anything. He might not
Shut up, you idiot! It's your fault we're in an even bigger mess than we were to begin with. You've killed 3 people, and for what? Nothing. You are the most useless excuse for a man I've ever known.
3?
Ernest, Oscar, and Thomas.
He doesn't remember.
Well, I can't forget. I certainly can't forgive.
Sir, the police have arrived.
Take that man too! He killed my husband!
Thank you.
I believe it's my time.
You killed Frederick for your son.
Aye, he may not be perfect, but he is my son.
Frederick may not have been perfect, but he was my friend.
All right, Mr. Scott, I have the killers in custody. I'll just have to take your statement, and you too, Mr. Williams.
Hang on just a moment, officer. This man, too, is a killer.
Mr. Scott, whatever could you mean? I have several witnesses out there that say Mrs. Williams tried to shoot you, and that Williams Jr. killed the others.
They are correct that Williams Jr. killed Ernest Collins and Oscar Thompson. But this man is responsible for the death of Frederick Williams. And if you will accept this as my testimony, I can explain.
I shall, Mr. Scott, but be warned if any of this is untruthful.
I would never lie in an investigation. It all started when Nathaniel killed an executive of Frederick's business at a party. Frederick obviously found out and saved this information.
Do you have any evidence for this?
Everything I'm about to say, I have evidence that I will produce as needed. Please let me finish. Now, once Frederick had this information, he took it to Walter and threatened to share it if Walter did not agree to his terms. Walter, of course, complied. The love a father has for his son is almost limitless. Frederick forced Walter into a deal where he would, in simple terms, hand over the controlling shares of his company in exchange for virtually nothing. Walter had no choice but to accept. It was either that or lose his only son, and the choice was obvious. But Walter still had a family to provide for. He's an old man, but his son and daughter-in-law have had their whole lives ahead of them. So he needed Frederick to lose those shares that would get him the company. And the only way for him to do that was to die. Walter had an ingenious plan, I must admit. He gathered some cyanide, which he had ready access to in his factory, and hid it on a handkerchief in powdered form. All he had to do was get Frederick to use it close to his mouth, and Frederick would be dead within minutes. It was a highly situational way of killing a man. And that, I suppose, is the only hang-up I know of.
I must admit, I was relying on manners and luck for that. It would be impolite to turn down a guest handkerchief. Florence was a great help, however, was not aware of my intentions.
Once Frederick used the handkerchief near his mouth, it was done. He had minutes to live and with no one the wiser. I only know because Oscar noticed the powder on the handkerchief, as well as the folded pattern.
Yes, the pattern was necessary for the powder to stay put. It's not in fashion, I knew that, but I figured it'd be ignored.
In any case, Frederick was dead, and your plan had succeeded. The merger had not yet been sent off, and you still had your company. If only your son had known what pains you'd taken for him.
Mr. Williams, is all this true?
Yes, sir. Mr. Scott, I am impressed. You figured out as much as you did.
Frankly, Walter, I got lucky. And by the way, officer, Ernest Collins was killed with that letter opener, and Oscar Thompson was shot with the display gun.
Duly noted.
Just one moment, officer. I have one more question for Walter here.
Fine, but make it quick. I have a lot of paperwork to do tonight, and it's already an hour and a half drive to get back.
Of course. Walter, do you regret what you've done?
Mr. Scott, do you have children?
No, sir.
Then what would you have been willing to do to save Frederick then?
A lot. I'd have been willing to do a lot.
A lot. Would you regret those actions later?
Depends on the actions.
Then I don't think you could understand me, Mr. Scott. If you ever have a child, I suspect you will, though.
All right. Move along. This isn't a Sunday school social.
I am tired. It's been a long night. We'll go down to the station tomorrow and make the appropriate arrangements and such, but for now, I believe I am owed a rest. Rupert!
Sir.
Has everyone left?
Yes, sir. The police have arrested those at fault, and the rest have already made their way out of the building.
Good. I'm going to bed, Rupert, and I do not need to be awoken.
Understood, sir.
And please, call me Cornelius.
All right, Cornelius.
Good night, Rupert.
Good night, Cornelius.